Hello everyone, my name is Mohnish. I'm a freelance senior Ruby developer who's currently based in Germany, in Berlin. I'm a student of Wings to Germany, and this video is about my experience of how I relocated to Germany 4 years back as an employee for a company who had sponsored my visa, and what has been my experience of finding jobs in Germany, especially in the IT field, while being employed with them before I eventually became a freelancer. So to start off with, one of the first things that I did was to make myself ready for these interviews. I realized that interviewing in India could be different from interviewing abroad, and there were certain things I would have to additionally do towards that. And I learned more along the way through trial and error also. And one of the things that I really valued more is, in general, things like making sure you are like following the best practices which are used worldwide in general. I mean, they could already be used at a company in India. So basically, just making sure that if your company or whatever you're doing is already in terms of best practices in general. If you're already good on that part, that's great. In terms of getting yourself ready with regard to that stage. One thing I also realized was the importance of having a short resume. A resume should be just like 2 pages at the max, ideally, and that really helps to get the attention of a recruiter or of a hiring manager sooner, and making sure it has the right content and as concise as possible. I learned a lot from my mentor to make my resume better, and I'm very grateful for that. So always see how you could even make your resume impactful with what you're adding in the contents there, and it's delivering value in terms of how you added value to your past roles or your current role even till now. In addition to this, one thing that really helped me along the way was cover letters. My cover letters had 3 aspects to it, and before I share more about that, I want to share a quick story. When I applied to one of the companies in Germany, in Berlin specifically, within half an hour of my applying to that particular role, the recruiter actually contacted me for that specific job position and to discuss next steps. And this was not something that came out of nowhere. It was a process. It was some learnings along the way, a lot of trial and error of understanding what people are looking for and what are they looking for genuinely in a candidate. So I realized a cover letter, basically something which has things which is not specified in your resume. That's one thing to start with. And a cover letter has like 3 basic components: a small introduction, why you'd like to join a specific company, and I think speaking about your personal why of joining a specific company, how you relate with your product. That really adds a lot of insight into your intrinsic motivation behind joining a particular company. And I think that's what they're looking for in candidates. Somebody who's like happy to go above and beyond to serve the company and to work towards their mission and goals. In addition to this, one thing that I've realized is the third aspect is, apart from the why and the introduction, is how can I add value to the specific role they're hiring for. So this is where you customize, or you make sure that your cover letter is tailored to what specific things you've done with regard to the job description from your past experience already, and mentioning that explicitly, and maybe mentioning 1 or 2 points about how that added value in a little bit more detail, so that they could clearly see the match between the JD and your skills. And all these are also important keywords which match between the JD as well as your experience, which makes it much more easier for the applicant tracking system or the recruiting platform like Greenhouse to take your data and for you to get a better chance of being shortlisted for the interviews. You can also mention things like your blogs, your open source contributions, or even your volunteering and coaching efforts. All these things can also be mentioned in the cover letter, and they really count towards your standing out in your application. In addition to this, like towards my getting a role in abroad, I tried different sources to apply for jobs. And one thing was a website called angel.co, which is now called Wellfound. That was a company through which I could filter for jobs which have got visa sponsorship. That also helped me to find jobs abroad. and it helped me to apply to the right roles where I know that my application will be considered and they will consider to even sponsor my visa. In addition to that, I also joined a couple of mailing lists. So because I'm a Ruby developer, I joined a couple of Ruby mailing lists and even Ruby Slack groups, and I even posted or I even followed up on job postings there, like, hey, are you sponsoring visas as part of the open roles that you have? And I also made a genuine attempt to connect with the people there and ask more questions about the role and about what they're looking for in those conversations. And I just also still made sure I submit my cover letters, even if I've had a conversation with them in the past already, because this was my attempt to be giving it my best effort. So when it actually goes to the interviews, there were 3-4 main aspects of it: the HR interviews, the tech interviews, the code pairing interviews, which is where you actually pair with somebody on a live example or a live use case or a live problem that they want you to solve. And the fourth part could be like a culture fit interview. So I'm going to go to each of the steps briefly. To start off with the HR interview, one of the key things that I've really valued doing, and doing this more, just out of genuineness or out of care, is reading more about the company, reading more about the product, reading more about how could my role fit into the bigger picture. And also your first round of interviews are mostly a lot about also your communication skills. And I think things like even body language, or even things like just striking a genuine conversation, is something that can go a long way. And one thing I've really valued over the years of interviewing, or just even speaking to people in general, is the importance of questions and the right questions. The right questions, or just questions in itself, are a reflection of your own past experiences and what may have got you to where you are currently in your life. And I think genuinely asking those questions and in an interested way can go a long way. Like, for example, whenever I used to have my HR interviews or my first round of interviews, I used to ask questions about what's the company culture like, what are the company values. And the importance of values, for instance, is because you're working in an international environment, it's important to understand that something like values is something which connects people across different cultures and backgrounds. And that's something which is at a very human level that connects one person with the other. So that's one thing I look forward to in my interviews. I try to ask them the right questions. And I also ask them questions about hey, what's challenging as part of your role? Because for me, it's more about understanding how I could be of service to the person from the very early stages, even in the interview process. And if there's something I know, if I could be genuinely helpful with regard to, I would definitely be happy to share my 2 cents at the right time whenever it may come up. And so in going on to the next part of the interviews, the tech interviews, these were actually quite challenging, because when you give tech interviews, you can be asked any question under the entire cloud of questions out there on tech, and it's sometimes you're not sure what you're going to be asked here. I realized over a period of time building my own question bank of questions, and basically fundamentally focusing on basics. That helped me go a long way. In addition to that, I also focused on preparing how what I did in the past roles contributed or contributes to the current role that I'm applying to, and what was the impact in that sense. So that, and speaking in terms of in clarity, or having a clear narrative, goes a long way in your interviews. So that's one thing about tech interviews, that what helped me along the way. Moving on to pairing interviews, code pairing rounds. That's a lot about practice. You get better with practice with each mock interview that you may do with somebody else, or a pairing interview. And people also care about seeing your collaboration, how open to feedback you are, what's your approach, what your thought process is. These are key things that go into actual coding interviews. So keep that in mind. It's your communication skills that also count in these code pairing interviews, and how you're going to be felt like to the other person when you're pairing with them for a particular interview, and do they see you as a colleague even in the future when they have to collaborate with you I think the pairing round gives a good insight into that. Moving on, the culture fit interview or like the behavioral interview, they might be two different interviews on these things, or might be the same interview. It's more about you as a person, and what are your own values, what are things that drive you as a human being, and how does that fit into the company culture, and how does that fit into the team you want to join, and how you could add even your own unique value there. I have realized, for me personally, I care a lot about empathy and seeing things from another person's point of view. And yeah, people relate with you in terms of your values, and that's one thing that they also look for in a person in general. So I think having an authentic way of putting yourself out there, and yeah, just being genuine and caring and just being yourself, and yeah, just talking about how would you approach things in a real life situation when there are challenging times, and what has helped you in your past to deal with the situations, reflecting on them and answering in terms of that. That helps you to give more justice to these behavioral interviews really, and for them to see that yes, you'll fit well into the culture, especially when there are challenging times, and you'll be there for the company in the times that they need. Moving on, just to wrap up things, I think in terms of the last steps, it's more about you taking a step-by-step approach. There's a saying, every epic journey starts with a baby step. There was a lot of trial and error for me personally to give these interviews and to even get the interview opportunities. I tried a number of times where I didn't get responses, but I never gave up, and I think persistence goes a long way. Believe in yourself. I think being humble is also very important, and I think keeping yourself in check is also very important. See how you can learn from each interview experience, and do request for feedback. I mean, from every interview experience, you can at least try to request for feedback. And that's how I also got better with every interview opportunity. The feedback really helped me grow into a better person, into a better candidate, and what it made me realize better about what people value in the candidates that apply for such positions. And be mindful, like, you are applying to a role where many people might be applying to, and whatever you do to stand out goes a long way. And I think your genuine efforts towards that is always seen. You just have to give it your best, and I think what you can't control is maybe the result, but at least you're trying your best is what counts more. That's what I've learned in my process. And be humble and be curious. That also is something which I would say. And just to summarize, one last thing that comes to my mind is, always try to see what you could do that could add more value to the company. Can you how in your behavior or how even in your approach there is genuine positivity that reflects for them or for the interviewers, that they feel like this person will be a value add not only to the team but to the company at large. And I think your enthusiasm, your intrinsic motivation, your genuine drive to be of service goes a long way. So stay positive and do your best. I'm sure that things will fall in place. You just need to focus on the process, and just focus on what you can do in terms of a step-by-step approach towards this. And yeah, keep trying to keep yourself in check and trying to get better along the way. Thank you.